This file was not meant to remain open, and yet it found you. You are now entering a recorded field transmission from the Department of Lost Places. This is archive entry 021. The subject of this record is known as the Observatory Beneath the Sea. Among all locations currently maintained within department archives, few present a greater contradiction. Observatories are traditionally built upon mountains, cliff tops, deserts, places where the sky may be observed without obstruction. The Observatory Beneath the Sea appears to have chosen the opposite approach. It exists below the ocean, not beside it, not beneath a coastline, beneath the sea itself. And yet every report insists upon the same impossible conclusion. The observatory is dedicated to observing distance. The earliest verified account originates from the journal of a navigator whose vessel became stranded within an unusually dense fog bank. The fog persisted for 3 consecutive days. Compasses behaved unpredictably. The sea remained unnaturally calm. The crew reported hearing distant bells, despite no land appearing on any horizon. On the 3rd evening, the fog briefly opened. A staircase emerged from the water. Not floating, not attached to any visible structure, simply rising from the sea before descending beneath the surface. The navigator later described the sight with remarkable simplicity. It appeared to be waiting. Since that report, similar accounts have appeared throughout department records. Though circumstances vary, the pattern remains consistent. Travellers encounter the observatory while crossing periods of uncertainty. Not necessarily physical journeys, sometimes personal ones, sometimes creative, sometimes intellectual. The sea, it would seem, merely provides the landscape. Access is gained through what surveyors have designated descent points. These take many forms: a staircase emerging from mist, a stone arch visible beneath unusually clear water, a submerged doorway revealed by moonlight, a spiral path descending through sea caves. Regardless of the entrance used, visitors eventually arrive at the same destination. The observatory stands upon the ocean floor. Descriptions of the structure remain remarkably consistent. A vast complex constructed from pale stone and dark glass. Its domes rise from the seabed like enormous pearls. Long galleries connect circular observation chambers. Lanterns glow behind crystal windows. The entire building appears untouched by pressure, depth, or time. Most remarkable of all is the surrounding water. Fish move silently overhead. Schools of silver shapes drift through shafts of filtered sunlight. Occasionally, enormous shadows pass beyond the limits of visibility. The sea exists on every side, yet visitors report no sensation of danger, only wonder. The main entrance bears an inscription carved into stone. As with many department locations, its origin remains unknown. Not everything distant is far away. The phrase appears repeatedly throughout subsequent observations. Researchers suspect it may represent the observatory's central principle. Inside, visitors encounter a vast rotunda known informally as the chamber of horizons. The room contains no telescopes, no charts, no conventional instruments, only enormous circular windows looking outward into the surrounding sea. At first glance, little appears unusual. Fish pass, light shifts, currents move slowly through the water. Yet prolonged observation reveals a curious phenomenon. The windows do not merely show distance, they reveal different kinds of distance. One window may overlook a coral reef existing somewhere beyond ordinary geography. Another appears to reveal a coastline no longer present on modern maps. A third shows a ship still travelling towards a destination it has not yet reached. Department researchers remain uncertain whether these views represent places, times, possibilities, or something else entirely. The observatory offers no explanation. Beyond the chamber of horizons lies a network of galleries lined with cabinets, thousands of them, each containing carefully catalogued records, not of locations, of sightings, the migration of forgotten ideas, the return of abandoned ambitions, the appearance of rare opportunities, the movement of questions through generations. The department has never encountered another archive organized in quite this manner. The records suggest that thoughts, hopes, and possibilities possess patterns of movement similar to ocean currents. They disappear, reappear, drift, gather, return. One surveyor spent several hours examining these documents before recording a brief observation. The sea is not empty, it is travelling. The statement remains amongst the most cited notes associated with the observatory. Further within the complex stands one of its most unusual chambers. Surveyors refer to it as the Room of Deep Currents. The room contains a vast circular pool. Its waters are perfectly still. No visible source feeds it. No visible outlet drains it. Yet visitors consistently report sensitive movement beneath the surface. Not physical movement, meaningful movement. Possibilities unfolding, events approaching, ideas gathering momentum beyond immediate perception. Several surveyors describe spending long periods seated beside the pool, watching, listening, waiting, not for answers, for understanding. The observatory appears less interested in prediction than awareness. Its purpose is not to reveal what will happen. Its purpose is to remind visitors that much is already happening beyond their field of view. At the heart of the complex stands the Great Dome, the largest chamber within the observatory, and perhaps the most extraordinary. The dome contains a single instrument, an enormous telescope. This detail initially confuses nearly every visitor. A telescope beneath the sea appears absurd. Its lens points not upward, but outward, towards the endless water beyond the structure. Those who look through it rarely agree on what they observe. Yet common themes emerge: vast distances, unfinished journeys, unexplored regions, unknown destinations. The telescope appears capable of revealing horizons that exist beyond geography. One surveyor described seeing every path they had ever taken, not with regret, with curiosity. Another observed countless lights moving through darkness, each representing an unanswered question, travelling towards understanding. A third refused to describe what they saw at all, providing only a single note. The horizon was much larger than I had assumed. The department has found this response particularly intriguing. Near the exit of the Great Dome hangs a map unlike any previously documented. The map appears unfinished. Large sections remain blank. Others contain only faint outlines. Some regions shift position when observed directly. Across the bottom edge runs a simple inscription. Exploration continues. The department has never determined whether the map depicts oceans, ideas, lives, or realities beyond ordinary comprehension. Perhaps the distinction is irrelevant. The observatory appears founded upon a simple belief. That mystery is not a problem to solve. It is a landscape to explore. Departure from the observatory occurs gradually. Visitors retrace their route through galleries and domes. The sea continues drifting beyond the glass. Fish move through distant light. The building remains calm, certain, attentive. Eventually the ascent begins. The staircase, the archway, the passage, whatever entrance first allowed access. The surface returns, the ordinary world resumes. Yet many visitors report carrying something away with them, not knowledge, not answers, a larger horizon, if you will. The feeling that far more exists beyond immediate perception than they had previously imagined. The department classifies the Observatory Beneath the Sea as Type, Maritime Observation Facility, Horizon Archive, Deep Exploration Site, Access Level Rare, most frequently encountered during periods of curiosity, uncertainty, or intellectual exploration. Final note from the archivist. The sea has always encouraged a particular misunderstanding. People often assume that what cannot be seen does not exist. Yet beneath every horizon lies another horizon. Beneath every current, another current. Beneath every question, another layer of discovery. Perhaps that is why the observatory was built below the water rather than above it. Not to observe what is visible, but to study everything that remains hidden. For now. This concludes Archive Entry 021. The record is sealed. The currents continue. The observatory remains watchful. End transmission. This file was not meant to remain open, and yet it found you. You are now entering a recorded field transmission from the Department of Lost Places. This is Archive Entry 022. The subject of this record is known as the Harbour of Quiet Tides. Among all maritime locations presently maintained within department archives, none inspire a greater sense of calm. Not because the harbour is sheltered, not because the sea is always gentle, but because everything about the place appears dedicated to arrival. Many lost places concern discovery, some concern memory, others concern transition. The harbour of quiet tides appears devoted to something simpler, coming ashore. The earliest surviving record originates from the logbook of a merchant captain whose vessel became lost during a prolonged voyage. The account contains no mention of storms, no navigation failure, no disaster, only an unusual observation. For many weeks, the crew had been travelling without feeling as though they were getting closer to anywhere. Then, one evening, they noticed a lantern, a single light shining across calm water. The captain altered course, and before dawn, the harbour appeared. No chart recorded its existence. No subsequent voyage successfully located it again, yet descriptions of the harbour continued to emerge throughout department records. Visitors arrive by many routes: sailing vessels, footpaths, riverways, mist-covered roads, occasionally by means impossible to verify. The method seems unimportant. The timing appears far more significant. Nearly every documented encounter occurs after an extended period of searching. Not necessarily searching for a place, searching for direction, meaning, understanding, a next step. The harbour seems unusually attentive to such circumstances. Its geography remains remarkably consistent. A crescent-shaped bay enclosed by dark cliffs, stone piers extending into still water, rows of weathered buildings overlooking the shore, lanterns hanging from wooden posts, the scent of salt carried on a gentle breeze. Unlike many coastal settlements, the harbour possesses no visible fortifications, no walls, no watchtowers, no defensive structures. The place appears entirely unconcerned with danger, perhaps because nothing arrives here by accident. One feature appears in every documented account: the tide. The water rises and falls as expected, yet the movement remains unusually subtle. The sea never crashes against the shore, never surges, never demands attention. Its rhythm is so gentle that visitors often fail to notice it at first. The department believes this may explain the harbour's name. The tides are not silent, they are quiet. The distinction is important. Quiet things are often overlooked, yet they remain present, steady, reliable, persistent. Surveyors frequently report an unusual sensation upon entering the harbour, a feeling that they have arrived later than intended, yet exactly on time. The same paradox has been observed at several other archived locations, most notably within archive entry 014, the frozen bell tower. Whether this represents a meaningful connection remains unknown. At the centre of the harbour stands a long stone quay. Mooring posts line its edge. Ropes sway gently in the breeze. Seabirds circle overhead. Curiously, vessels are almost always present. Ships of every description, small fishing boats, elegant sailing vessels, exploration ships, river barges, craft unlike any recognized by modern maritime authorities. Yet no arrivals or departures have ever been observed. The ships are simply there, waiting, resting. Several surveyors describe the impression that every vessel has recently completed an important journey. The harbour appears less interested in travel than what follows it. Near the quay stands a building known informally among department personnel as the Mariners' Hall. The structure resembles an inn, though no formal designation has been identified. Inside, visitors find warmth, conversation, food, firelight, maps covering the walls. Unlike the maps documented in the Observatory Beneath the Sea, these charts depict recognizable coastlines, at least initially. Closer inspection reveals unusual annotations, places where courage was found, places where certainty was lost, places where unexpected discoveries altered a journey. The maps appear dedicated not to geography, but experience. One surveyor spent several hours examining them before noting, "Every voyage seemed to lead somewhere different than intended. Every voyage arrived somewhere important." The department continues to regard this observation as highly representative of the harbour itself. Beyond the hall lies a narrow street winding upward from the waterfront. The road eventually reaches the oldest structure within the settlement, a small building known as the Registry. The Registry contains countless shelves, ledgers, journals, bound volumes arranged with extraordinary care. Visitors initially assume the books record ships. They do not. The books record returns. A traveller returning to a forgotten passion, a friend returning after years apart, a writer returning to unfinished work, a musician returning to a neglected instrument, a wanderer returning home. Not every return involves a location. The registry appears dedicated to recognizing a deeper form of arrival. One recurring figure is frequently associated with this building. Department records refer to them simply as the harbour master. Descriptions vary considerably. Age, appearance, gender, even mannerisms differ between accounts. Yet all observers agree upon one characteristic. The harbour master always seems pleased to see visitors. Not surprised, not impressed, simply pleased. Several conversations have been recorded over the years. Most concern ordinary matters, weather, journeys, the condition of the sea. Yet one exchange appears repeatedly throughout witness accounts. Eventually, visitors ask a version of the same question. How did I find this place? The harbour master reportedly offers the same answer every time. Most people don't find the harbour, they reach it. The meaning remains open to interpretation. The department has made no official ruling. At the end of the bay lies a curved stone breakwater extending into the sea. Nearly every visitor eventually walks its length. The path offers an uninterrupted view across open water. The horizon stretches endlessly beyond. The harbour remains behind. Lanterns glow along the shore. The tides move quietly below. Many visitors spend considerable time there, watching, thinking, listening, not because anything extraordinary occurs, because something settles. The department has struggled to describe this effect precisely. Perhaps the harbour specialises in completion, not endings. Completion, the subtle moment when a journey finally becomes part of you. Eventually visitors leave, some by sea, some by land, some by routes impossible to reconstruct afterward. The harbour never attempts to persuade anyone to remain. Its purpose appears fulfilled simply by providing a place to arrive. As distance grows, the settlement becomes increasingly difficult to see. Mist gathers, light changes, the shoreline softens. Eventually the harbour disappears entirely. Only the memory of calm water remains, and the feeling of having reached something, even if its exact nature remains difficult to define. The department classifies the harbour of quiet tides as type, maritime threshold settlement, arrival archive, navigational recovery site, access level, occasional, most frequently encountered following prolonged periods of searching, wandering, or transition. Final note from the archivist. Much attention is given to beginnings, to departures, to first steps. Yet journeys possess another important moment, the moment after arrival, the moment when movement becomes understanding. The harbour appears dedicated to preserving that space, a reminder that reaching a destination is not always the end of a voyage. Sometimes it is the point at which the voyage finally makes sense. This concludes archive entry 022. The record is sealed. The lanterns remain lit. The tide continues its quiet work. End transmission. This file was not meant to remain open, and yet it found you. You are now entering a recorded field transmission from the Department of Lost Places. This is archive entry 023. The subject of this record is known as the island that moves with the moon. Among all locations presently maintained within department archives, few have proven more difficult to chart. Not because the island is hidden, not because it is small, not because access is restricted. The difficulty arises from a simpler problem. The island does not remain in one place. Department records concerning the island span more than a century. Throughout that time, surveyors have attempted repeatedly to determine its position. Every effort has failed. The island moves, not randomly, not unpredictably. It follows the moon. The precise nature of this relationship remains uncertain. Yet every verified observation confirms the same conclusion. As the moon travels its ancient path across the sky, the island undertakes a corresponding journey across the sea. Researchers have proposed numerous explanations. Tidal anomalies, unusual geological activity, unknown maritime phenomena. The island appears entirely uninterested in providing answers. The earliest account originates from a lighthouse keeper stationed along a remote stretch of coastline. Over many years, he observed a small island appearing in different positions offshore. At first, he assumed errors of perception, distance, weather, poor visibility. Eventually, he began recording its location. The records revealed an impossible pattern. The island was moving, yet always in harmony with the moon's phases. When the moon waxed, the island drifted eastward. When the moon waned, it travelled west. During the full moon, it occupied its most distant position. During the new moon, it became remarkably difficult to locate at all. The lighthouse keeper's final note survives within department archives. The island does not seem lost. It seems to be following instructions. The department has never improved upon this assessment. Visitors typically encounter the island while travelling by sea during periods of personal transition. Not necessarily crises, not necessarily uncertainty, simply change. The sort of period during which familiar identities begin shifting. Old routines fade. New directions emerge. The coastline behind grows distant while the coastline ahead remains unclear. It is during such voyages that the island occasionally appears. Most first notice it beneath moonlight, a dark shape upon silver water, neither large nor small, near enough to reach, far enough to remain mysterious. The crossing is always calm, regardless of conditions elsewhere. Waves settle, wind softens, the sea becomes unusually cooperative. The department has found no record of anyone struggling to reach the island once it has chosen to appear. Upon arrival, visitors discover a landscape unlike any previously catalogued. The island contains no permanent settlement, no harbour, no obvious inhabitants. Instead, it consists of meadows, low hills, scattered forests, and winding paths. The terrain appears simple, yet no two maps agree. A grove documented by one surveyor may be absent during the next encounter. A hill may appear where none existed previously. A path may lead somewhere entirely different. The island changes continuously, not dramatically, gradually, as though the landscape itself participates in the same cycles that guide the moon overhead. One feature, however, remains constant. At the centre of the island stands a circular stone platform known amongst department personnel as the Lunar Court. The platform overlooks the sea in every direction. Ancient stones form a perfect ring. Moonlight always seems brighter there, regardless of weather conditions. Surveyors frequently report lingering at the site long after arriving, not because anything unusual occurs, because the place encourages observation of tides, of clouds, stars, thoughts. The island appears dedicated to the practice of noticing. Several department reports describe an unusual phenomenon associated with the Lunar Court. Visitors sitting within the stone circle occasionally become aware of changes occurring throughout their own lives. Not intellectually, visually. Relationships shifting, perspectives evolving, old habits fading, new possibilities emerging. Nothing is judged, nothing is explained. The changes are simply visible. The department currently classifies these observations as symbolic manifestations, though researchers privately admit uncertainty regarding the distinction. Beyond the Lunar Court lies a region known unofficially as the Garden of Phases. Unlike conventional gardens, its appearance varies according to the moon. During the crescent moon, seedlings dominate the landscape, small beginnings, fresh growth, new arrivals. During the full moon, flowers bloom across every path. The garden reaches extraordinary abundance, Colour appears almost luminous beneath the night sky. During the waning moon, petals fall gently across the earth, leaves drift through the air, the garden grows quieter, not diminished, reflective. Then the cycle begins again. Surveyors often leave the garden with a curious impression that endings and beginnings may be less separate than they appear. One recurring figure is occasionally encountered near the garden. Department records refer to them simply as the Moon Gardener. Descriptions vary, as they often do. Yet one conversation appears repeatedly throughout witness reports. Visitors eventually ask why the island moves. The gardener's response remains remarkably consistent. Everything moves. When pressed for clarification, the gardener typically gestures towards the sea, the moon, the clouds, the visitors themselves. The island simply chooses not to pretend otherwise. The statement has become one of the most frequently cited observations associated with the archive. At the island's north edge stands a cliff overlooking open water. From this vantage point, visitors can observe the moon's reflection stretching across the sea. Many remain there for extended periods, watching the silver pathway shimmer upon the waves. Several surveyors report the sensation that the reflection resembles a road, not leading somewhere else, leading forward. The distinction appears significant. The island does not encourage escape, it encourages participation. Participation in cycles, in growth, in change, in becoming. Eventually, visitors depart. The sea remains calm. The moon continues its journey. The island slowly recedes behind them. Yet the departure reveals the location's most extraordinary characteristic. When viewed from a distance, the island appears to drift almost imperceptibly across the horizon, not carried by current, not pushed by wind, following, keeping pace with the moon, continuing a journey that may have begun long before human memory. The department classifies the island that moves with the moon as type, maritime celestial habitat, cyclical landscape site, transitional geography archive, access level, rare, most frequently encountered during periods of personal change, growth or transformation. Final note from the archivist. Many people spend considerable energy attempting to remain exactly as they are. The island proposes an alternative perspective. The sea changes, the seasons change, the moon changes, the night sky itself changes, yet none of these transformations diminish what they are. Perhaps change is not the opposite of stability. Perhaps change is one of its essential components. The island appears to understand this better than most places, which may explain why it never stays still. This concludes Archive Entry 023. The record is sealed. The tide continues. The moon proceeds along its ancient path. The island follows. End transmission. This file was not meant to remain open, and yet it found you. You are now entering a recorded field transmission from the Department of Lost Places. This is archive entry 024. The subject of this record is known as the Lighthouse Beneath the Waves. Among the many maritime locations preserved within department archives, none appears more impossible. A lighthouse, by its very nature, is intended to be seen. It stands above the sea, above the rocks, above the horizon, a visible signal, a warning, a guide. The lighthouse beneath the waves appears to disregard this principle entirely. It exists below the surface, not partially submerged, not damaged by the sea, not ruined, operating, illuminated, intact, and according to every verified account, it continues to guide travellers despite remaining hidden from view. The first documented encounter originates from the logbook of an oceanographer whose research vessel encountered an unusual region of calm water. The sea was clear beyond anything previously recorded. Visibility extended far into the depths below. While observing the seabed, the crew noticed a light. At first they assumed it to be a reflection, then a vessel, then an equipment malfunction. The light remained steady, rhythmic, purposeful. Beneath hundreds of meters of water stood a lighthouse. The observation was dismissed by authorities at the time. The logbook, however, eventually entered department custody. Decades later, similar reports began appearing from unrelated sources. The descriptions proved remarkably consistent. A tower, a lantern, a beam moving slowly through the darkness of the deep. The department subsequently opened a formal investigation. The results remain inconclusive. Visitors rarely discover the lighthouse intentionally. Like many archived locations, it tends to appear during particular circumstances, specifically during periods when travellers feel uncertain about direction. Not physical direction, life direction. Moments when the next step appears unclear, when certainty becomes difficult to locate, when visible landmarks disappear. It is during such periods that the lighthouse occasionally enters awareness. The approach varies considerably. Some encounter it while sailing, others while diving, a few while simply walking beside the sea. The method seems irrelevant. The recognition appears more important. Visitors become aware that something is guiding them before understanding what that something might be. Eventually, the lighthouse reveals itself. The surrounding water is unusually calm. Sunlight penetrates remarkable depths. Fish drift through silent currents. The sea becomes almost transparent. Far below, resting upon the ocean floor, stands the tower. Its architecture differs slightly from conventional lighthouses. The structure appears older, more elegant. Its stonework bears symbols not yet identified by department researchers. The lantern room emits a soft golden light visible across extraordinary distances. Yet the most remarkable feature is not the tower itself. It is the beam. Rather than projecting upward towards the surface, the lantern rotates through the depths. Its light sweeps across the seabed, across underwater valleys, across hidden ridges and forgotten ruins. The beam appears dedicated to illuminating what cannot ordinarily be seen. One surveyor described it as a lighthouse for things beneath the surface. The department considers this observation highly significant. Several expeditions have attempted to reach the tower directly. Those that succeed report an unusual phenomenon. The closer one approaches the lighthouse, the more difficult it becomes to focus upon its physical details. Not because visibility decreases, but attention shifts. Visitors become aware of memories, patterns, insights, connections, things previously overlooked. The lighthouse appears less interested in its own architecture than in what its light reveals. Near the base of the tower lies a structure known among surveyors as the Hall of Currents. The chamber contains no water despite its location beneath the sea. Visitors enter through an archway carved into the stone foundation. Within, they discover an enormous circular room. The floor is covered by a map. Not a map of oceans, a map of influences. Paths intersect across its surface. Lines connect distant events. Small moments lead toward unexpected destinations. Chance encounters produce lifelong consequences. Forgotten decisions alter future journeys. The map appears to document the hidden currents operating beneath ordinary experience. Many visitors spend considerable time examining it. One surveyor later recorded, "Nothing seemed accidental anymore. Not planned, not controlled, connected." The distinction remains important. The department does not interpret the map as evidence of destiny. Rather, it suggests that lives possess depths often ignored while navigating the surface. Further within, the lighthouse stands a chamber known as the Listening Room. Unlike most rooms within the archive, it contains no visible artifacts. No books, no instruments, no furniture, only sound, or perhaps memory of sound. Visitors describe hearing distant waves, voices carried across years, conversations long forgotten, pieces of advice previously dismissed, moments that seemed insignificant at the time. The room appears dedicated to recovering things overlooked rather than things lost. The department has noted a recurring pattern among witness accounts. Many visitors emerge from the listening room with renewed appreciation for influences they had previously underestimated. A teacher, a friend, a parent, a stranger, a book, a journey. The lighthouse seems particularly interested in small lights, the kind that illuminate quietly. The Great Lantern Chamber occupies the highest level of the tower. Despite existing beneath the sea, the room remains filled with warm light. The lantern itself is larger than expected. Its mechanism remains impossible to identify. No fuel source has ever been discovered. Visitors often expect some great revelation upon reaching the summit. Instead, they find a simple inscription engraved around the lantern base. Guidance does not require visibility. Nothing more. Yet many surveyors describe this sentence as the most important artifact within the entire structure. The lighthouse appears founded upon a single principle. Not everything that helps us find our way announces itself. The stars guide sailors without speaking. Currents shape voyages without appearing on the surface. Roots support forests while remaining hidden beneath the earth. The most influential forces are often the least visible. Eventually visitors leave the tower. The ascent towards the surface begins. Light grows brighter. The sea becomes familiar once more. When they look back, the lighthouse remains visible for a brief moment, a golden glow resting upon the ocean floor. Then distance and water reclaim it. Only darkness remains below. Yet many visitors report leaving with a peculiar certainty. Not certainty regarding where they are going, certainty that guidance exists even when it cannot be seen. The department classifies the lighthouse beneath the waves as type, maritime navigation structure, subsurface guidance facility, hidden current archive, access level, rare, most frequently encountered during periods of uncertainty, transition, or personal navigation. Final note from the archivist. People often search for signs, for certainty, for clear directions. The lighthouse suggests another possibility. Perhaps guidance is already present. Perhaps it operates quietly beneath awareness, like a current beneath the sea, invisible, persistent, patient. The surface may appear uncertain, yet deeper waters often know precisely where they are going. This concludes archive entry 024. The record is sealed. The lantern continues turning. The currents continue flowing. The depths remain illuminated. End transmission. This file was not meant to remain open, and yet it found you. You are now entering a recorded field transmission from the Department of Lost Places. This is archive entry 025. The subject of this record is known as the Tide Pool of Lost Voices. Among the many coastal locations preserved within department archives, few are smaller, and few are more difficult to explain. Unlike harbours, observatories, islands, or lighthouses, the tide pool of lost voices occupies no vast territory, no hidden coastline, no forgotten sea. It is, by every observable measure, simply a tide pool, a shallow pool of sea water left behind when the tide retreats. And yet department records suggest that within this modest place rests one of the most unusual archives ever documented. The first verified account originates from a naturalist exploring an isolated stretch of coastline more than 70 years ago. The tide had withdrawn unusually far. Rock formations emerged from the sea. Narrow channels wound beneath stone outcrops. Pools of water reflected the evening sky. The naturalist reported hearing voices. Not loudly, not clearly, faintly, as though conversations drifted across great distances. Assuming nearby travellers were responsible, he followed the sounds. Eventually he reached a single tide pool surrounded by smooth black stone. The voices seemed to originate from the water itself. When he looked into the pool, he saw only his reflection. The voices ceased immediately. The account might have been dismissed had similar reports not continued appearing over subsequent decades. Today, the department maintains more than 100 independent observations. Remarkably, they agree on nearly every significant detail. The tide pool appears only during exceptionally low tides. Visitors typically discover it while wandering coastlines during periods of reflection. Not searching, not exploring, simply walking. The sort of walk people take when thoughts feel larger than usual. The approach often begins with sound, not words, the suggestion of words. A distant conversation, a fragment of laughter, the cadence of a story, a melody almost remembered. These sounds seem to drift upon the wind before gradually leading visitors toward the pool itself. The tide pool is rarely impressive in appearance. Indeed, several surveyors admit they nearly walked past it. A circular basin, no more than a few meters across, clear water, dark stone, small shells scattered around the edge. Nothing extraordinary until one listens. The voices become most noticeable when the surrounding coastline falls quiet, when waves recede, when seabirds drift elsewhere, when attention softens. Then the tide pool begins to speak. The department uses the term speak cautiously. No direct communication has ever been recorded. No messages, no instructions, no warnings. The voices are fragments, moments, echoes. Visitors report hearing snippets of conversations, half-remembered stories, words spoken long ago, questions, promises, farewells, songs. Curiously, none appear distressing. Even sorrowful voices carry an atmosphere of gentleness. The pool does not preserve pain, it preserves presence. One surveyor described the experience as standing beside the memory of language itself. The department continues to regard this as one of the most accurate descriptions on record. Several researchers initially proposed that the voices belonged to people who had been forgotten. Subsequent observations complicated this theory considerably. Many voices appear familiar. Not personally familiar, universally familiar. The sound of encouragement, the sound of reassurance, the sound of a story being told around a fire, the sound of someone saying goodbye, the sound of someone saying welcome home. The tide pool appears less concerned with individual identity than human experience. Near the water's edge, visitors often discover small objects deposited amongst the stones. A button, a seashell, a ribbon, a smooth piece of glass, a folded scrap of paper. These objects vary between encounters, yet they share a common characteristic. Each feels connected to a memory, not necessarily the visitor's own, simply a memory. The department has never successfully removed any item from the site. Objects invariably disappear before departure. Researchers now consider them part of the archive itself. One of the most intriguing features appears only under particular conditions. when the sea is exceptionally calm and the sky reflects perfectly within the water. At such times, visitors may notice that the tide pool seems deeper than it should be, far deeper. The reflected sky extends downward. The water becomes impossible to measure. The voices become clearer, not louder, closer. Several surveyors describe hearing stories, not complete narratives, fragments, the beginning of a tale, the middle of a memory, the final sentence of a journey. The department believes the pool may function as a gathering place for unfinished echoes, words released into the world that continue travelling long after they are spoken. This interpretation gained considerable support following observations by surveyor Alias Hart. While seated beside the pool, Hart reportedly heard a voice say, "Perhaps someone will need this later." The statement appeared entirely ordinary, yet it affected him profoundly. Years afterward, Hart reflected that many of the most important things he had ever learned came from words someone had spoken without knowing who might eventually hear them. The department subsequently incorporated this insight into ongoing research. At the northern edge of the tide pool stands a weathered stone marker. Unlike most inscriptions found throughout department locations, the message is brief. Nothing spoken with care is ever truly lost. The origin of the inscription remains unknown. The sentiment, however, appears central to understanding the archive. The tide pool does not collect voices because they are trapped. It collects them because they continue travelling. A kind remark, a useful lesson, a comforting story, a shared memory. These things move through the world much like tides themselves, returning in unexpected places, reaching distant shores, influencing people they were never intended to reach. As evening approaches, the sea gradually returns. The tide rises. Water fills surrounding channels. Waves reclaim the coastline. Visitors often remain as long as possible, listening, observing, remembering. Eventually the pool disappears beneath the sea. The voices fade. The surface becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding water. Nothing marks its location. And yet many visitors leave carrying a peculiar feeling. Not nostalgia, not sadness. Connection. The sense that human lives overlap far more than they appear to. That countless unseen influences move quietly between us. That stories, kindness, wisdom, and memory travel much further than we realize. The department classifies the tide pool of lost voices as Type, Coastal Echo Archive, Linguistic Preservation Site, Maritime Memory Habitat, Access Level, Occasional, most frequently encountered during periods of reflection, remembrance, or quiet contemplation. Final note from the archivist. The sea possesses an unusual relationship with memory. It receives rivers from distant lands, carries messages between shores, returns objects long after they had vanished from sight. Perhaps language behaves similarly. Words leave us, stories travel, conversations continue beyond the moments in which they occur. The tide pool appears dedicated to preserving this truth, a reminder that meaningful things rarely disappear completely. They simply continue their journey, often beyond the limits of our hearing. This concludes archive entry 025. The record is sealed. The tide is returning. The voices continue travelling. End transmission.